Perfect. Well, look, Philip, thanks so much for joining. Really pleased to have you here. Like I say, this is just a platform to have a casual conversation with yourself, learn a bit more about your journey and your product in a bit more depth. So, maybe first things first, let's just get into it. And if you can just talk us through a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the intro, Junaid. My name is Philipp Caspari. I'm co-founder and currently CEO of Healyan. My background is medical device engineering. Before that, I was working for Airbus in aerospace engineering, and originally I studied mechanical engineering, so all sorts of engineering. And even during studying mechanical engineering, I worked for the electrical engineering department. So I liked all sorts of flavors, so to speak, of engineering, and tried to apply my knowledge everywhere I can. And I really love engineering. It's my passion, right? And yeah, I got to this topic we are working on with Helion because my grandfather had Alzheimer's, on my mother's side, and it was really gruesome looking at a person I looked up to. Yeah, like going through this, and also how it affected my entire family. And that's why I thought like, hey, there has to be something I can do. And I looked up, yeah, latest literature on Alzheimer's therapies, and they were all awesome for an awesome reason. There were some non pharmacological ones, which I was able to understand and dive deeper into and understand the physics behind it. Because what we're doing with Helion is a physical approach, and yeah, that's how Helion was created as first some sort of a brainchild. And when I studied 2 PhD semesters at UC Berkeley in California, I was really encouraged by a professor, neuroscience professor called Michael Silver, to dive deeper into this, because we realized that there are no really good existing tools for actually studying such effects. Everything that was available was yeah, self-made prototypes by researchers, and they were conducting smaller scale clinical trials. And now I can maybe dive into what Healin actually is. Healin is an audio-visual neuromodulation system. I probably need to break it down a bit.
Please.
Audio-visual is obviously the stimulus that we deploy to the nervous system. So we stimulate the ears and the eyes, basically. And it's also part of the name. We heal through the eyes. Yen is kind of an Asian word for the eye. And yeah, that's why Healyan. And how we're doing this is we stimulate not just with continuous stimulation, like continuous light, and maybe somebody knows already that there are some daylight therapy systems which just simulate for your body that it's a nice day, it's beautiful weather outside, and it helps you regulate your mood and your circadian rhythm. But that's not what we are doing right now. We can do this. Technically, this is really easy for us. But what we are primarily doing is we are using flickering light and pulsating sounds to stimulate the nervous system and induce certain EEG signals. EEG is the measurement of the brain waves, right? Brain electrical signals, electroencephalogram, EEG. And we can induce certain brain waves with light and tone pulses instead of applying electrical signals back into the scalp. Right? That's also done and is also a known method. One can also do this with magnetic fields, but we realized really early on that in order to really have positive effect at a large scale in society and make this type of technology, this neuromodulation technology in general, really deployable and a widespread phenomenon, has to be easy to use. And magnetic field stimulators and electric field stimulators are relatively complex in their application, or complicated, not I shouldn't say complex, complicated in their application, and you need specially trained doctors, yeah, like neurologists, and then they have to have special training on the particular systems that they use from each manufacturer, because everything is manufacturer dependent and so on. And yeah, this could all be resolved with a much easier to use system. and that's why we try to perfectionize the auditory and visual stimulus and make it easy to deploy. We chose form factor for the device as a form factor of glasses, and we developed a patented indirect lighting system, so you can basically wear the glasses in everyday scenarios and just use it and apply the therapy while doing anything but therapy, right? While going about your day, having a coffee, reading the newspapers, and helping yourself at the same time, right? And you can also have auditory stimulus with relatively modern headphones or hearing aids at the same time because they're Bluetooth bound. So that's a quick recap of my background and what we are doing at Healyan.
No, thank you for that. That's really, really in depth. Just out of interest, the glasses method, is that because you just touched on you had to make it easy to use? Is that why you went down the glasses method purely?
Yes. So I can break down our methodology a bit. First, we went down the road. Everybody went down. That at that time it was 2018, 2019, also 2020, when I was still in my master's years and starting my PhD. The thing was, I tried and experimented around with some self-developed hardware and also got feedback from professors. And I quickly realized, I can use a self-made lamp with just a few buttons and a microcontroller, an Arduino, for example, and program it to play a therapy session, for example. But for elderly people, it's really cumbersome to use. I also tried it with my grandfather. It wasn't usable. Right? You could do EEG studies with it, but that's it. Right? You could do fundamental research.
Yeah.
And nothing else. And the idea evolved into, hey, how could we make this first more compact, because it's a big limiting factor, and then also easy to use, because you have to imagine if you have a light shining directly into your eyes from the front, it can be quite unpleasant, right?
Yeah.
And you're not getting blinded or anything, but if you're looking at the sun or into the sun, you have this blue dot running in front of your eyes if you look away, and it keeps staying in the center of your focus for quite some time. Excuse me. And it's the same with really bright lamps that you're looking into, and we didn't want that effect, right? But we still needed to deploy something, and we needed to deploy something that would also serve a lot of people reliably. So the first big challenge was really diving into the physics of light that we can create behind the glasses frame in front of the eyes, or in junction with the eyes. And we needed to make sure it fits all sorts of head sizes. The distances of the eyes of people needed to be in a certain range. Like what we needed to make sure that the light is giving off the same effect, although the ranges of the eye distance varies quite a bit in many people, and also the distances from eye to nose ridge and to the ears, where the glasses temples are located and putting their weight on. And all those contact points with the head needed to be assessed in a way that we can always make sure that the physical approach is correctly applied. And that took us, I would say, quite a while, like 9 months, still primarily at Berkeley. We figured it out at Citrus Invention Lab in, I would say, late 2021, early 2022. And then we decided to form a company once we figured that first fundamental part out. And then we built everything around it, legal structures, right? Then patent applications really early on the route. Those were the first tasks we had to do after building the company. Everything was still secret up on this point. And then we applied for government grants. Then we built a software architecture around it so we can deploy the therapy very effectively, and also invest into series production to be able to conduct clinical trials, even because previously it was 3D printed prototypes. The physics was working and the electronics were starting to work and the software was starting to work, but we also had to think ahead and make sure that we can actually test something at scale, because it's cool if you can prove that your physics works, but you also have to show that the clinical effect is there, right? So
Yeah, of course.
the only way to do this is with scalable production.
Yeah, absolutely. If we just dive into that a little bit more. So you started this when you were still studying, is that correct? In theory, right?
Yes,
You started the
yes,
development when you were
exactly.
still studying. So what year was that? Sorry.
I was studying at Berkeley, studying from August 2021 to August 2022 for 1 year as an
Yeah.
exchange PhD student. I got a stipend from the German government agency. It's called DAAD stipend, Deutscher Akademischer Austauschdienst. Maybe a good translation is German academic exchange service. This might be a relatively okay translation, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no, makes a lot of sense. And so how long did it roughly take you from, let's say, concept
Hmm.
to where are you with the product now actually? Like
Yeah.
are you still, that would
Can
be
I
quite
show
good.
it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah, yeah.
can
Yeah, yeah.
show it in the video feed for everybody's listening. You could watch it later, take a look at it later, or take a look at our website, healyan.com. I'm having a black cardboard box in my hand with a logo on it and our company name. You slide it out, and it has a small quick start guide on it with a QR code. Talks about our mission and our vision. We want to
Yeah.
help people achieve their peak mental performance and keep it until the end of their lives. Right? You can also not just help people with Alzheimer's, but help healthy people keep their mental health at peak performance. Right? And then when you slide out the cardboard box, beneath the quick start guide, you have just a neat looking charging case and a charging cable. Charging cable comes with braided is a braided cord with the company logo on it. And you get out the charging box. Has a USB-C in the back side. And when you open the lid, you see the Healyan glasses laying in there. And on the left side, in the left temple, there's a CE marking and where it's made. It's made in Germany, by the way, at the moment. And you turn on the switch and you see a small green dot that it's turned on. And then the glasses goes into a certain mode that you left off when you used it the last time. So it remembers what setting you used, brightness and strobing frequency to induce the brain waves you want. For most purposes, you could use the gamma stimulation, which is a frequency band in EEG signals above 32 hertz, and you can induce those frequencies above 32 hertz visually as well, right? And just use the glasses for it. And then you open up the app. The Healyan app can be found on Google Play Store and obviously the App Store as well. And then let me turn it on into English. English. Here we go. We have English, Spanish, and German right now. We're working on different languages. And then you switch between modes, set the frequency manually, and set it to a frequency that is maybe visible and fits my camera frame rate or shutter rate. So you can see it, everybody who is currently watching the video feed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and I think you can see something now, right? It's not perfectly matching the camera shutter rate, so that's why it's visible now in the video feed. And I'm having turned on the 40 hertz frequency now, which is very very well studied to be effective against Alzheimer's. It's studied with electric stimulation, magnetic fields, auditory and visual stimulation, and there have been, I think, already 3 meta-analyses published this year about this method. And what's missing right now is some large phase 3 clinical trials. And that's what we're planning to do next year. Right? We have successful stage 2 trials. The safety for this type of technology is very, very well established. Like, you have 1 in 100,000 people that have photosensitive epilepsy, but they know that. Maybe you've heard of this regulation in the UK. It's called the Harding test,
Okay.
which makes sure that nobody with photosensitive epilepsy is exposed to any TV broadcast that has quick switches between bright settings in the TV screen and very dark settings in the TV screen. And that's normally used around the world to screen for such instances where flickering light in films and videos might be harmful for people. And normally you see this in cinema and video and streaming services, like flicker warning in the top left corner before a film or your favorite TV show begins, right? Or a streaming service. But in the UK, there's this law that you cannot broadcast anything before having checked it, and most other countries just deploy a flash warning. That's it. And those people who are sensitive to those light pulses and would react with an epileptic seizure, those are the people we cannot use this type of technology on. They would have to resort to magnetic field stimulation or or electric stimulation, maybe in combination with auditory stimulation. And that's the only risk factor this technology has right now that's known. It has been tested on hundreds of subjects across the world, not just in studies that we initiated or any of our competitors initiated, because obviously in this emerging field there are some players who want to get to market quickly. And that's basically it when it comes to the safety aspect. And when it comes to the efficacy aspect, there are some downstream effects that are known and some that are currently unknown, even for the fundamental mechanism of Alzheimer's, right? Alzheimer's is obviously a very complex issue, but what we know so far is that it has something to do with the accumulation of beta amyloid plaques. So some sort of protein that builds up in the brain that's not cleared out by your lymphatic system. Plus, it also has to do something with toxic proteins called tau proteins. Generally, I'm trying to keep it short, and some signaling of neurotransmitters, right? And some things are not working properly, that those neurotransmitters get detached to the neurons and are metabolized, and there are some chains in the signaling processes and that are just breaking down over time in people's nervous systems. And it's like a ticking time bomb, and when it starts, it's starting slow first and then declines rapidly. And what we know with the neuromodulation approach is that we can reactivate some of those features of the lymphatic system that clears out those toxic proteins. The beta amyloid plaques are getting cleared out, and the tau proteins are getting cleared out by some cells that are called microglia cells. They normally do this in healthy people, and they're getting more and more inactive until they are completely shut down in Alzheimer's people. And we can reactivate them without pharmacological intervention with such a technology. So that's the fundamental working mechanism. And the cool thing is, in theory, it could also be used in sync with a pharmacological intervention. Hasn't been tried yet. I'm not aware of any clinical trial that try to deploy multiple treatment options simultaneously. But that's the status quo on the research on this field. Very roughly, very quickly. I hope maybe some people listening in on this will know briefly what I'm talking about and will know much more than I just try to explain quickly.
Thank you so much. Like, what I'd be quite intrigued to know is that because I think what you developed is very unique. So
Thanks.
taking it from idea to the product you've just shown, Can you just talk through roughly how long that took and what were some of the challenges along the way? That'd be
Yeah,
quite interesting to hear a bit more.
there were quite some challenges. Okay, first let's start with how long it took. As I told earlier, we had some prototyping going on already in Berkeley when we formed the Healyan team. Obviously, in like every incubator lab, you have some 3D printers that you can play around with. And then I tested some things, obviously with my and my co-founders' own private budgets, because we needed specialized manufacturing technologies that we were not able to get from a incubator lab, to already try to make it work, right? And we invested in some PCB manufacturing. Then we tried this out, and it's not just about the method we used, but also combining different manufacturing methods to even test out the fundamental technology. In particular, we had to resort to 3D printing, and most 3D printing techniques come with some sort of limitation. And primarily for deploying a compact device, your limitation will be the tolerances you can 3D print. Because when you're dealing with really small miniaturized electronics, to work and deploy physical effect, the arrangement of them has to be precise most of the time. At least in our instance, it's the case that they have to be arranged very precisely to fit together, especially how we shape the light behind the glasses, behind the lens, in front of the eyes, and deploy the light that way. And the tolerances of most 3D printers that are commercially available are within 1 or 2/10 of a millimeter. And that was a problem at the beginning. And we really struggled with 3D printing adequate plastic parts that we can put in the electronics, to even test out the technology properly. Because the print quality was just varying so much. Had to do with print orientation. It had to do with material choice. We used resin printers first. Also, the surface quality sometimes an issue when you have those connecting joints or support structures that you have to remove. Because of that, we then later switched over to powder bed manufacturing, powder bed 3D printing, SLS and MJF printers. One uses laser to just melt plastic powder, mostly PA12, PA6, and then we also found out that the temperature in this manufacturing technique that's put into the powder bed is creating some sort of warping in the plastic parts, so that even though the parts were similarly oriented, because of slightly different thicknesses in the parts, they were not fitting well together. And that was also an issue later. And then we switched to multi-jet fusion, which was creating very low warpage, because you have the powder bed and then you inject like a photosensitive resin really thinly into the powder bed, and then you cure it with UV light each layer, and that creates very low warping, almost no warping, and the parts were fitting together very well for the first time. And with some tweaking, we also were able to get the parts accuracy dialed in for the first time. And that was happening after maybe 1.5 years. Like, we started in August 2021, right, with the whole thing in Berkeley. And then we already formed the company and applied for patents and stuff. And once we had the first very well working prototypes, also with charging cases included, and the software working okay already, we reached the beginning of 2023. I think it was in February 2023, and we used a government grant for that in Germany. It was really cool. Like, we started in Berkeley, came back to Germany. Half of our team is German, the other half is American, and yeah, then in 2023 we applied again for a grant, and then because we knew we had to switch over to a different manufacturing setup, because we were able to produce 5 relatively well working prototypes in like half a year. They had to be dialed in still with particular like fine manual labor, like grinding it down with a small Dremel tool, some scalpel scraping surfaces, and to make parts fit together well, and also give them a nice surface finish so we could show them and show to investors and interested jurors of government grant applications what we actually have planned. Right? It was just a demonstrator essentially, because we just had 5. We couldn't do much with this. And yeah, then we applied for a grant and got funding for just changing manufacturing methods, and we deployed primarily injection molding tools. We settled on a electronics design for all the electronics parts in there. It was like 5 PCBs for the glasses and 3 for the charging case. And yeah, then I settled on a design for all the plastics parts. And yeah, then we placed an order and hoped that we get the plastics injection molding tools quickly. And it took quite some while and some struggles in between. And some hopes and prayers also saved us. It was quite tricky. And then in, I think, September 2024, we received the first large manufacturing batch of plastics parts, and also large batch of all the electronics components, and we still had to assemble everything. And just before Christmas last year, just before Christmas 2024, we sent out the first glasses to people who wanted to try them. We had about 100 people signing up beforehand. We collected sign-ups for a year roughly, and those 100 people were the first to test it out. We already had the safety testing under our belt for all the hardware and software, so it was safety tested, and had those safety symbols put onto it, like it's RoHS compliant, CE tested with all the applicable norms, and also under FCC, it's applying and adhering to every standard. So no hazard is expected from this device. As I said, we obviously also put on this flash warning for people with photosensitive epilepsy, but in comparison to lamps, only the person wearing the glasses and applying the effect to themselves could potentially suffer from an epileptic seizure if they have this rare case of photosensitive epilepsy. By the way, it's about 1% of people with epilepsy have photosensitive epilepsy. And as I said, they know it because they can't watch regular TV or go to cinemas. So it's very, very safe.
Thanks so much for that. So just to understand, like, so 2021 roughly is when you started to kind of start developing this in Berkeley. Was it 2023 you said you got your first grant? Is that correct?
No, the first larger grant was given to us in 2023, and from that point on, we applied also for many startup. I would say, what is it called? Like an award type of thing. We have many awards for startups in Germany and the European Union, and some in the US. And we won the Innovations Prize of Central Germany in 2023, for example. That was a grant. And all of them come with small cash prizes. Then we applied for accelerator programs and stuff like that. All those things came with small cash prizes. And we used, obviously, every penny to further develop and enhance the glass and the systems around it. And that was primarily happening in 2023. We also applied for some research collaboration grants with Fraunhofer and Neurotech EU and Center for Intelligent Sensors, CIS. And we collected some of our network partners and development partners through research grants. Because most of those government-backed research organizations in Germany and the EU, they sometimes give out research grants, like time budget for a researcher of theirs for half a year of their time, roughly. That's relatively common and typical. And if you have a good idea and can convince the jurors that it's worth pursuing, you have a good chance of succeeding in those pitches. Obviously, the competition for such things is always pretty stiff. And we were lucky to get through a couple of times, right?
Yeah. What do you think that you did that helped? Would you have any advice for anyone else that's trying to get these very competitive grants on what they need to show or what you need to actually do to give yourself the best possible chance?
That's a very good question. Because we applied for a lot, I would say first the thing is always try to make your problem as understandable. That you try to make the problem you're trying to fix as understandable as possible.
Okay.
Show that you have competence in just explaining the problem that your technology, your approach tries to fix. Obviously, Alzheimer's is relatively self-explanatory with almost 2 million people just in Germany diagnosed with it, and just above 600,000 currently getting any treatment at all, right? We're trying to serve more than a million, roughly 1.3, 1.4 million people that are currently getting no treatment. We're trying to bring some treatment form to them. Because of the low risk profile and relatively high clinical effect in comparison to existing treatments. So that was a relatively straightforward thing. But next, you also need to show competence in-house that you have, but you also need to show for those research grants some sort of resource limitation. And for our grants, for example, we won with Fraunhofer was primarily like, we have some software things that we would like to develop, but our in-house team has other things to do, and we really need your help to make this happen quickly. That is a straightforward thing for most jurors to understand, and also to show that you have competence, you know what you're doing, you know exactly what you want, and your only limitation is either money or time. And that's what they are there for. That's what those pitches are there for. They're not primarily focused on giving you access to breakthrough research and outsourcing it to you. That would be too big of an ask, right? You have to come up with the ideas yourself. And if sometimes, not in our case, was not our case, but maybe something groundbreaking comes out of collaboration, then obviously those institutions always want a piece of cake of that, right? And they're trying to license this. This is their part of the business, is totally fair. But it would also be much harder for people to apply for, hey, with a pitch like, hey, there is this issue. We do not really know what we want to do, how to get to a solution. We do not really know how to frame the question, even how to solve this problem technically, right? If you're asking for such a grant, the ask for the resources would be much greater, more than just half a year from one researcher. It would be like a team of researchers of theirs for like 2 years or something, to do all of this for you. That's why you have to be really precise in what you need from them, and what you want from them, and what you expect from project collaboration. And if you can string all of this together, I think it's highly likely that you can have a good shot at it. Also, depending on the issues that other people are trying to solve with their grant applications, right? We had some grant applications coming from all over Europe that we succeeded in, and we had some very small localized grant applications for a state, for example, the state of Bavaria or Saxony. We thought, hey, this is a small state. It's very condensed, that the competition here might be limited, and we didn't succeed. It's okay. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. Also the resources, the smaller the area of applicants, right? The smaller the location from where they can come from, the more tightly regulated the networks are, kind of, and the harder it is to overcome the hurdles of the local heroes and the local champions, because they're very well known, very well established, and their issues are already known that the issues that they're trying to solve. And if you're new in the field, you have to keep knocking on doors, right? You have to apply a second time, you have to apply a third time, and don't give up. And that's what we did to get where we are, right?
Thanks so
Then
much.
you become that person that, hey, maybe you didn't transmit your message the first time properly, it wasn't very well understood. That was the case for us one time. We also applied for an innovation grant, the innovation prize. It was a small cash prize, but it came with a good media recognition. Before that, we won a really large prize, right, the Central German Innovations Prize, and then we just applied for the Innovations Prize for one state of Germany. It was Thuringia, and we failed. We failed there because the pitch was changed a bit, and it's always nuances, I would say. Yeah. Also, you cannot ever have the same pitch twice. That's something as well, because you always have to think ahead. Who is the audience? What is their background in science and technology? What can they understand? What what might they not understand? And you have to dive deeper into some areas and other areas not. And those are the considerations you have to make before building a pitch and pitching then in real life.
Interesting. I guess it must be a bit of a chicken and egg situation in the sense of when you might have you think you've got a very good idea and you feel you need some funding and support to get it there. But then the issue is the audience who are listening, they want to see maybe more. So whoever's going to be giving that funding, they want to see evidence, right? Yeah. So you want to try and get your product at least up to a certain point where you've proven things, you've incorporated data, you validated it. So do you mind just maybe sharing a bit of advice on that? Of what I'm trying to say is, what point should you at least try and get your product to before you actually go and ask for these things? Because surely there are risks though you go and ask for it too early, right? Where if you just have a great idea, but it's like, well, what have you got to show for it? And you haven't got enough to show. So have you got any advice on that? Like of what you should at least, where you should at least get to? I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So how we approached it was like a step-by-step thing. You can imagine like two beams in a diagram, level of progress, and for one axis or for one beam, and the other beam is like a level of things you ask for, grand sizes, grand applications, projects. Obviously, with good ideas, there are some really early things you can ask for, like help from an incubator space. They mostly do that. They have 3D printers standing around anyways, and some kilograms of filament or resin or 3D printing powder or whatever costs like, let's say, a couple $100 or euros or British pound or whatever, right? And some soldering irons are there, right? You can do something and build like not even a prototype, I would say, like a proof of concept maybe. And with that, you can apply for the next level of funding, right? You can apply for small founder idea grants, which maybe give you 3 to 5 grand in cash if you win, if you succeed. And it makes your life a bit easier, and gives you not really runway for your team or your company, but at least it gives you some recognition first. Some people validated your idea, and maybe some prototyping budget, especially in the hardware space. It makes sense. Also, depending on what you're trying to build with hardware, right? With medical devices, rarely there's any medical device that needs billions, I would say, in hardware development, except from MRI machines, probably. And what could be a different thing? Maybe like a I can come up with something that might take billions in development for medical hardware purposes, right now at least, or maybe like a BCI, brain computer interface, like Neuralink or something, maybe that, but also not in particular hardware resources. It's more like the people you need to pay, the network you need to build to put the right minds together. That's more the limitation on this end. So I would say it's a step-by-step thing. Once you gain some recognition and you have something to share, you can try to apply for the next the next stage, for the next step,
Stages.
and try to overcome that hurdle. And then you can build more of your product, and you can make more of your vision, and the reality you want to create. You can make more of that come true, right? You can iterate, and then when it's getting better and you showed some progress, then you can apply for the next stage, and it's inching each other forward, each other of those beams I would try to describe in this instance. And when you're getting to a certain point, you can really try to strike really large grant applications, like the EIC Accelerator, for example, European Innovations Council, which is a really common thing to apply for in medical device technology companies, because I think the maximum non-dilutive grant is 2.5 million. That's
Okay.
pretty big budget, and you're not giving away any equity for it. Like that, if you get that's great. We didn't get yet. We didn't apply for it yet. We will probably do this in the future. Let's see. But the thing is, it's like an inching forward on multiple ends. Like you said, it's a chicken and egg problem in reality. So you always need to evaluate in which area of those two you can make more progress with your limited time that you have and your limited resources. Can you spend some time perfecting your pitch or develop the next stage and the next iteration of your product? Right. So
That's a really good bit of advice, actually, because I think naturally there's a temptation, and you think that the faster you try to go, the better. You need to have intensity, you need to work hard. But what I take away from that advice is that don't be afraid to move a little bit slower and, like you said, inch and inch, right? Because, like you said, if you can show a little bit and then ask for something accordingly, then move a little bit further, then ask again. The last thing you probably want to do is ask for something much bigger than what you're worth at that point in time.
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Because in the beginning, you're not worth anything. The idea is not worth anything unless it shows some progress and it shows some improvements on above the status quo. And that's what in a startup comes down to. It's like a bet against the status quo.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
unless you can show that you can do better than the status quo, it's just an idea. And what really matters, I would say, is the execution. And also when it comes down to, like you said, like maybe move slow. What it leads up to, this approach for us at least, what it led up to was actually it's like some compounding effects. Actually, we were really fast in hindsight that way, because we needed to stay on top of our game and needed to be on our toes all the time, to evaluate where can we do the next move, apply for grants, do research and development, and always kind of juggle around those two things simultaneously and push on both fronts. And really short iteration cycles, really quick iteration cycles on both ends lead to fast improvements, I would say, because you're also getting used to it. That's the next point. In the future, once you apply for large investments, for example, with VCs, you have to show quick progress anyways, because that's the ultimate thing that matters for investors. Yeah, you have a big shiny pitch deck and a lot of buzzwords in there and good projected revenue, but can you actually make it happen, right? It's the progress that matters, because maybe in those times and days, 2 years later, some AI might take your job and do all of what you're doing. Who knows? Embodied AI with robots. I don't know. Like we cannot see in the future, and to make it happen quicker gives you proof and gives confidence to investors and grant juries that it's actually worth spending their time and resources on you. So yeah, and if you're getting used to iterate for pitches and grant applications and stuff like that, while also working on a product, it's proving your point that you have something worth following, because if you're executing on both ends,
Really
showing
interesting.
it's worth doing it.
I guess with a unique product like yours, it'd be interesting just to learn a little bit more about how you validated the idea. So like integrating feedback from patients. So I guess that would have been surely quite important when you were presenting your idea, right? Okay, it sounds very good in theory, can you prove to us that it actually works? Like, how did you do that? Do you mind just going a little bit more into that?
Yeah, no worries. We did it before actually we decided to develop the healing glasses already.
Okay.
That's one of the core philosophies of Silicon Valley. Talk to your customers. I cannot strengthen this point enough. The first thing before we really decided to build that thing, to build prototypes, we reached out to people who are using those types of technologies in clinical settings, researchers, right? You're currently using self-built stroboscopic lamps for fundamental research, how it affects the brain rhythms, the brain signals in EEG and stuff like that. And what would you like to be improved upon the status quo? And then we talked to the subjects that were part of those clinical trials. Hey, what would you like to be improved upon the status quo? What can we do better than what we have? And yeah, one thing that came out of it was people need something they can use at home. They don't want to and should not go to the clinical site, to the hospital, to the university hospital every day, because it's taking a lot of time, and it's also taking a lot of time of the staff, of the researchers. For example, also that's the limiting factor with the EEG kind of TDS or TACS, transcranial alternating current stimulation, right, or transcranial direct current stimulation, and magnetic field stimulation caps. It's just time consuming, and you want to validate effect without spending a lot of time, right? And that's the issue we identified first, and we concluded that the system has to be easy to use, right? And then you move forward with what makes a system easy to use. Oh yeah, if you don't have to lay down half an hour or sit down half an hour twice a day to deploy and use the effect on your body and measure the outcome, because if you can do something else, it's getting closer and closer to the usability of a pill, of a drug, and that's what we're ultimately competing with. We know that there are many more downstream effects from neuromodulation that are beneficial and working in parallel. And pharmacological approaches so far have targeted one biological endpoint, one marker. For example, beta amyloid plaques are the primary target of the available and approved drugs in the Alzheimer's field. They both, which is cholinesterase inhibitors, and the other are antibody treatments against those beta amyloid plaques. They both target amyloid plaques. That's it. And with neuromodulation, you can also target tau proteins. You can reactivate the lymphatic system. You can also have an effect upon the signaling of neurotransmitters, very beneficial effects. And yeah, maybe even approach, that's also one thing we are currently studying, one approach to improve just memory consolidation and memory processes themselves, like how is information received and stored in working long and short-term memory, approaching all those aspects with it, which cannot be easily targeted with a drug. And you want to make it easy to study things first before you can actually do large studies. That was the limiting factor. That's what we identified, and that's the problem we solved initially with building the system. And now we can, yeah, hopefully do really large clinical trials really soon. The next thing we have planned is a trial, multi-center trial, probably 3 to 4 centers with more than 150 patients across 1.5 years. So yeah, that's the next challenge for us ahead. And you can only ask for funding for that if you're prepared. Right? That's the thing I cannot strengthen enough. You will be pushed by investors and institutions on every front. When you're not prepared, you're getting rejected ruthlessly, and they throw you out the window. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thanks for taking through that. It'd be interesting to get your view as well on regulatory and compliance. How important do you think looking at the regulatory side of things is, and at what stage did you start looking at it? Because I speak to founders all the time, and I guess a lot of them, they integrate regulatory right from the beginning. Some of them are developing their product and they've not even looked at the regulatory. So I'd be interested to get your viewpoint on that.
Yeah, we also started looking at it right from the beginning. As I said, in the beginning, I was working in a medical device company before going to Berkeley, and I switched to medical device engineering during my master's, and so I had some background knowledge on how to do this, and especially because we knew if we want to get to the point where we can actually do large clinical trials to get a CEMD marking, medical device, right, or FDA approval, stuff like that, we need to have all the safety testing done beforehand, because no doctor lets any company use a non-medical device that is not even tested for safety on anybody, right? Especially not on patients. That's why you have to do the safety testing first before you can actually prove that the clinical effect it's supposed to bring, that it brings this clinical effect to patients. And that's why we did really early on vigorous and large portion of documenting and regulation oversight. Like we knew exactly which norms and standards to adhere to, and how to document everything we're doing. Like for risk analysis, the ISO 14971, for example, very typical. And it's like the entrance door to risk analysis. How to classify your product, very straightforward under this norm and standard. And also how make your life easier in how you document things, right? We had one shared drive where we upload all the relevant files, like down to every resistor in the electronics. We document which parts we're using, and then deploy this also to the safety testing labs, give this info to them, to the manufacturers who you're outsourcing some parts of your manufacturing to. Everybody has to be in full picture primarily, right? Especially when you're building early relationships with institutions, with potential investors, with suppliers, and not, like, I would say, don't be over cautious. No, wrong. Like, be over cautious with what you're documenting. Document more than you think you need in this moment, because you might need it later, right? Because later you might go back to a certain design decision in your software or your hardware, or even your strategy, and you think, why did I choose this option, this path, and not the other one? Now the other one seems so obvious, and you might forget why you did this decision.
You need the foot trail, basically.
And to not question yourself constantly, you need to have this path cleared out and coming all from the documentation, because otherwise you're just making circles unnecessarily. If you not track your path and your decisions clearly, it's just leading to a mess and undecisiveness down the road. And the one thing you cannot afford is undecisiveness, because it's wasting everybody's time, and you have to be quick, as I said earlier, especially in this time and age, where everything can change in a day. Who knows what's coming in 2 years? So you have to be quick, and you cannot waste any time, because it's the only thing nobody can take away from you. Everybody's day has 24 days, and so spend your time well, I would say, because at the beginning you don't have any government grants or any institutions mostly that are helping you, or you don't even have a big of a budget that's helping you. You have to be time efficient. So that's one very important thing everybody has to keep in mind. If you're developing everything from a gut feeling, I would say, sometimes, in very rare cases, I would say this can work, especially if you have a lot of experience and a really clear vision, and it's maybe not a very complicated thing. It's just a small improvement upon the status quo, like 10-15% better than what there is. So you're making small changes onto existing hypotheses and approaches. But if you're developing something from the ground up, something that is trying to get first approval of its kind, then especially documentation is a really big part that you cannot let down yourself onto, and your team as well, and everybody involved, every organization.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I guess otherwise there's that risk you could just be developing something and it's not even
Yeah.
compliant, and that's going to cost
Correct.
you money.
Yeah, yeah. For example, I can give you a really quick technical example. There's an ISO standard that's called 6060 and then one. It's electromagnetic compatibility testing and then safety. So your device doesn't interfere with commercial radio frequency bands like yeah, CB radio or Bluetooth and other things. And yeah, those antenna tests are very very expensive. And if you're messing up on your development for your radio module, your radio communication module for your Bluetooth or something, this can lead to a lot of iteration cycles that are really time and financially expensive, time costly, and yeah, and that's why you have to make a decision. For example, do you buy a pre-certified module or not? And we decided to buy a pre-certified module, just as a quick example. Because if we go through all of this ourselves, yeah, we could make it potentially a few percentages better, more compact, more power efficient. But is it necessary at this point, right? Maybe we can do this later, once we are in market and want to improve our device for like 10% the battery range, so to speak, more battery duration, right? And that's when it makes sense. That's when you have to think back at what your decision points were and look at optimizing potential.
Absolutely, absolutely. I guess from a even when you spoke about speaking to people that are going to fund and for grants and investors, right? I guess even regulatory will be quite important for that as well. Ultimately, right? They want to see that you've got things in order before they back something, right? So,
Yeah, yeah,
so
because they have something to lose as well, right? They could lose face. they they back this bullshit company right, everybody would laugh at them as well. They have their reputation, that they put and basically give it to you by giving you a grant, right? What is it called in English? Sorry.
that's right.
um yeah, yeah, they stand in front of you, kind of, in a way, and protect you with their credibility that they've built over years. And if you mess up, it's reflecting bad on them as well. So they
Yeah,
want to avoid that for good
100%.
reasons, right? For obvious reasons.
100%. I remember speaking to another medtech founder quite recently. I don't want to misquote him, but he said, from his opinion, 90% of devices they're over-engineered. And I
Mm,
think from what I understood from him is that sometimes it's so easy to get lost into your own idea and passion that you
yeah.
forget about the audience. And some of the things that you've really shared today have been so useful, how you spoke to the audience from the very beginning. And I think that's one thing I've taken away from you. You've always been looking at what's currently there. What do people want? And even when you've got into like ease of use as well. So it's like, oh, we've
Mm,
got this great idea. It can do this. But if it's not even comfortable, even these things that we think are small are effectively the main thing. If something's not
yeah.
comfortable, if it's not easy to use, people won't use it. It doesn't matter how good it is, right? So it's so easy
Yeah.
to get lost and forget about your audience, right?
Exactly. We also are partially guilty about this of this. Like, we obviously, like many startups, you have to pivot your path to
Yeah, of
market
course.
access sometimes, right? And we were also looking at other options we could do, other pathways we could go, and maybe quicker market access options and stuff like that. And we were also trying to develop other features, but which were also reliant on outsource uh, help, I would say, like, for example, support from smartphone companies and the operating system in particular. Um, for example, we wanted to connect hearing aids, normal hearing aids, um, with with our system, right? And wanted to deploy auditory stimulation with any hearing aid or headphone. And the issue was that not all headphone companies or hearing aid companies caught up to the latest Bluetooth standard, which is low energy audio, and which means that people with the latest standard of radio frequency communication based on Bluetooth, they can receive multiple, like the system is built in a way that it works like a broadcasting station that comes from your smartphone. Smartphone becomes like a broadcasting station, and everybody can be a receiver that applies this new Bluetooth standard. And some headphone companies were not catching up, and some smartphone companies were not catching up, and we had really hard time to really like get this to work because there were not the right external resources available at this time, and we were struggling to move forward technically on a technological front because of some outside limitations. And that's when we decided, hey, let's wait until everybody has caught up to this. We already have made our plans. We've developed to a certain point, and we can leave this project on the back burner. Obviously now it's working, but it was at that point in 2023 when we thought, hey, this was announced even by Google that this feature will be put into Android 14 at that time. And now just this summer, it was deployed on Android 16. Like, it took them 2 years. Not shitting on them. They have good reasons to do that, because there are other things more important to them and their customer and their audience. And obviously, they're not betting an eye on a small startup who wants to help Alzheimer's people, Alzheimer's patients, and also people with hearing loss. By the way, there's an 80% overlap of people with clinical hearing loss and Alzheimer's. Not from one way to the other, but most people with Alzheimer's develop hearing loss because of the neurodegeneration. Not saying that a lot of people with hearing loss develop Alzheimer's, right? But within the population of Alzheimer's patients, there is a high percentage of people with hearing loss that comes from the neurodegeneration process. And that's why it was so important for us to develop this. And at that point, before we even made it work properly, we had some first proof of concepts and some software validation, kind of, not real world customer ready deployable technology, but we knew we could make it work at a certain point. And that's when we already applied for a patent application for this, to include hearing aids into our system and use them as an external third-party device to deploy our therapy. And we applied for a patent application and hopefully get it granted soon. But yeah, that's some sort of rational decision you have to make at a certain point, and a clear pivot in strategy, because at a certain point you cannot move further in some areas and then decide what you do next, right? And then obviously the decision first has to come from talking to people who it might concern. And those are the customers first, and then also the institutions who might use your product or might give you grants and give you money, or right, and help you with the next step of your journey.
Absolutely. You kind of kindly took through earlier about how your next stage of clinical trials. Do you mind just going into a bit more what your kind of priorities are beyond that, like where you are as a business now, and what your goals maybe in the medium to longer term from here?
Yeah. So in the medium term, in the next 2 to 3 years, we obviously want to get medical device certification for Alzheimer's therapy, because it was a starting point. But what it will lead up to is we will develop and build like a portfolio of therapies based on our technology, based on our ecosystem, so to speak. It's consisting of hardware and software. Because as I said earlier, the 40 hertz stimulation was tested across multiple physical approaches, auditory, visual, electric, and magnetic stimulation to be effective against Alzheimer's. But as you can imagine, other stimulation therapies use different frequencies. The effect here of neuromodulation is primarily driven by the stimulation frequency. The effect is frequency dependent. And so with other frequencies come potential other therapy options and approaches to different diseases: multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, also going into psychological disorders like depression, anxiety, ADHD, PTSD, and even sleep issues, chronic insomnia, right? And we will take a look at all of those once we have reached certification of the hardware. as a medical device for Alzheimer's, because then we can kind of turn the company in some sort of like a pharmacological drug company without using drugs. But the comparison here is on a different level with drugs and what we are doing. The comparison comes from how easy it is to deploy something new. Because once you have a drug pipeline built and have certified the pathway to how to deploy this drug, and then you think, hey, it could also have beneficial effects on another sort of disease modifying effects in another area, then it's much easier to prove that, because safety has been tested, right, and it has been shown to be effective on one disease. And then you can and you can do research on other fields, and it's the same with medical devices. And what the neat part is, of course, once you have a drug developed and approved, your manufacturing costs or something like that, if there's even a manufacturing cost, I would say, in pharmacological interventions, because you can stamp out pills, like you have manufacturing costs, not even in a cents, not even a penny, right? Once you make millions of pills for your drug. And it's the same with software, because once you have the hardware certified and you have the methodological approach certified to be effective, and your treatment protocol is certified and stuff like that, then you can just do a small little tweak, which for us is the stimulation frequency, and test it on other areas, test it on other diseases. And there's good clinical evidence for all those diseases that I just listed earlier, that we can experiment with. And we already showed that it can be effective, hopefully at this point, at very severe neurological disease. Like Alzheimer's is a deadly disease. Let's be precise about it. It's leading to millions of deaths around the world each year. And if we can show we can have a positive effect on this disease, much more positive than any pharmacological intervention, people will give us a bigger chance at other diseases as well, and let us try it out and give us grants, hopefully, and help us to develop other approaches to those diseases. And therefore, as I said, circling back, we will build a portfolio, hopefully after getting the approval for Alzheimer's therapy for multiple diseases. And from that point on, later, we hopefully will be able to also go into longevity medicine and preventative care, and help people avoid it in the future. Not just treat it when it's already there, but also put some research and resources into prevention, because it makes a lot of people's lives easier if we have less people with deadly diseases. It takes a lot of resources off the economy. Imagine all those relatives and also caretakers, nurses and doctors, who suffer from the dread they see, from the misery they see and witness every day, mentally and physically. So that is a big hope we have, at least. That is the long-term future. Maybe best case like 5 to 10 years.
No.
But that would be beneficial for everybody participating, I would say.
Absolutely. No, thanks so much for taking me through that, taking everyone listening through that. It's really useful. Have you got any advice as well, more on like, guess, the commercialization of the product as well? Just because I think, like we spoke about earlier, when you see a problem, you want to develop a solution, you're taking idea to concept, but then there's also the business side of things, what markets to target, pricing. Have you got any advice of like when people want to commercialize their product, what they should be looking at and what they should be thinking about?
Yeah, in the context of medical devices, there is a clear path. Obviously, you have to get the certification as a medical device first, even if it's just an app. Like not making not saying that it's just, air quotes, just an app, because sometimes it's a lot of work as well, and tons of development goes into, maybe especially when it's AI supported. But yeah, if you don't have hardware, it maybe in some cases may be quicker, right? But still, you have to get the approval first, and then the next step is always trying to get a lot of people's eyes on it, and maybe you can make them pay out of pocket. In most places on earth, that's still the case. Especially in the US, a lot of people pay out of pocket only with really large expenses like surgeries. Your healthcare insurance pays for it, and especially if it's a mild effect of your product, maybe even a preventative effect, then most people are willing to pay out of pocket if it's preventative, or if it's a mild effect and their problem is not yet very big, so they have to go and take a drug or take surgery or whatever, more severe intervention. People are willing to pay out of pocket. And if the problem you're fixing, if the health problem you're fixing or trying to fix or prevent or modify even the progression, try to modify the progression, then always try to go for the insurances. Because if you want to get a certain depth and a certain width of the market, and try to reach, yeah, for the highest potential of the market, the highest percentage of market shares, then you have to go for the insurances, especially I would say in Europe, because we have this universal healthcare, right?
Yeah.
Kind of universal healthcare. Although the system is really strained at this moment, you always have to go for the insurances and try to have them cover your device. And obviously, in this case, if you're trying to go for the insurances, they have to also financially profit of it, which means you have to show that you save them some money if they make your device prescribable with insurance coverage. And if they see, yeah, if we prescribe millions of people with your product, be it a drug, device, or whatever, or an app, we can actually save a lot. So it's a win-win-win situation. The patient first, patient comes always first, patient benefits. Therefore, the insurance benefits, because they don't have to come back to the doctor that often. That might be one case to save money, right? They don't have to see the doctor every couple of weeks, like with drugs against Alzheimer's. Or you could say the adverse effects are much lower, or the risks of adverse effects are much lower. You have to prove that statistically over time, of course, and that's also costly. But if you prove all of those steps and show that the patient benefits, then therefore with downstream effects, the insurance saves money, then you can justify at a large scale that your product is worth the reimbursement you're seeking. And it's always a balance and also a negotiation part later between the insurances and the manufacturers of medical products, medical devices, drugs, what the reimbursement level should be. Obviously, you cannot make the I would say the financial incentive for any party too big. It should always be balanced, right? So yeah, and where that sweet spot is on you as a manufacturer to find out, right? Because you want something, you want people to use your device. You have to prove that it's worth using, and also prove that to the investors first, and then the insurances. So when you prove all of that, it's a no-brainer for the insurances, and then you can get wide adoption in the market of your device. And when you achieve that on one front, as I said, what we're trying to do with Healyan in the future, also try to get it into other markets. As I said, not just Alzheimer's for us in the future, also other neurodegenerative diseases and psychological diseases, hopefully. But this all is upon the outcome. It's dependent upon the outcome of our very large Alzheimer's trial. So,
I really appreciate that. One thing I just want to pick you up on, like you said, that try and get as many eyes on your product as possible. Have you got any advice around how to do that as well? Because I guess there are people who think, okay, I've seen the problem, I've got a solution now. People just don't know about this. How do I get seen? Have you got any advice on that?
Yeah, it especially in the medical field and medical device field, also drug. I would say it highly depends on the risk category. Obviously, with brain implant, like a Neuralink, you cannot show it to everybody what it's like to have Neuralink implanted and just take it out again.
Yeah.
or like a heart pacemaker. You obviously have to talk to the experts first in the field, right? To the most credible researchers and doctors in the field, and get their opinion on your approach first. And that is the main issue: finding the right target audience to talk to first. That was also what we learned. Like, yes, obviously the researchers are one obvious point to go after and get their opinion, but also the opinion of the people who will use it on a daily basis,
Mm.
consciously or subconsciously, right? If you're having a pacemaker, you don't want to feel it. You don't want it to interfere with any of your everyday life. Yes, if you're going through airport security check, maybe you have to take a different approach through the security check-in, or whatever, right? But the thing is, you have to be aware of those things that might lead to a rejection of your customer in the long-term future, and how to get to those customers, future customers, potential customers, is the real question, I would say, that you have to answer. And when it comes to early testing for our device, what we did, um, without making any medical claims, we tried to sell it as a wellness and, yeah, I would say like wellness and mental health support, like a meditation app thingy, like a meditation app add-on. We tried to advertise it as this first, just to get feedback on the hardware, just to get feedback on what it is that we're trying to solve here. Um, yeah, and that was I would say a legal trick, not trick, but uh, the thing is, in medical devices and other things, you're not allowed to make any clinical trial that's not pre-approved by an ethics committee, and have it tested on humans, what you're doing, um, without the approval of authorities, right? And that's why we're currently splitting up the portfolio into one, like, wellness device kind of thing, and also medical device. And obviously, just when you're trying to get feedback on how the haptics of the product is, this is relevant for everyday use, but it's not relevant for the clinical investigation later, in the sense that it's not focused on the medical effect. What you can ensure, though, is that the usability is high, that the feel of the product is good, and get feedback on that is at least as important as getting and understanding the physics, in our case, the physics of the product, right. And that's the turn we took, and I think we took and executed on it successfully, without, yeah, I would say, obviously without breaking any law. We had a lot of legal advice from lawyers, and also regulatory experts, also government backed from Germany, by the way. We are partnering with Medical Forge. It's an accelerator program of the German government, and you have to be very careful with this. I want to say that clear and loud to everybody listening. You have to be very careful of what you're allowed to do and how to do it legally. As I said, we needed to take this extra turn to separate the products from each other. Obviously, how it looks and feels physically, and where the button or the switch is located, and how the charging case behaves. That's not a clinically relevant thing, how the hinge of the charging case opens or closes, or how easy it is to plug in the charging cord. But some of those aspects are very important for everyday use, and you want your product to be used every day to even have a clinical outcome in the end, because
Yeah.
that's the worst part, when you have a non-implantable device. If it is prescribed, if you can maybe show some effect on fundamental research, but then in a large trial, people don't use it and don't adhere to the prescription protocol, to the study protocol, because it's just cumbersome, it's time consuming, it's maybe unpleasant. All those things, you want to make sure and avoid those, as early as possible. So that's what we're trying to do, and hopefully did successfully. We have, yeah, more than 100 everyday users at this point, and they're enjoying it. Also, we're not making any medical. We did not make not any medical claims until we have the medical device certification, any of the approvals we need to do so legally, and also the software, not just the hardware, is separate from those two product lines. Right, wellness stays wellness. We make no claims, no medical claims, and with the medical device version, there comes its own. It comes with its own software and its own finely tweaked hardware. So yeah, and obviously, yeah, we document also the split in those pathways.
It's a really good bit of advice, because I guess like you can go about innovation in so many different ways, but this is a very regulated industry, right? So like you said, how do you go about it? Just be very careful as well. That complies with. So thank you so much.
You would shoot yourself in the foot if you're not careful about it.
Absolutely. I appreciate I've taken so much of your time. One thing I did want to leave you with, like I say, you've taken us through your journey in a nice amount of depth and been very candid and open. If someone was to start their journey today as a medical device founder, I know it's device dependent and that kind of thing, but do you have any general bits of advice of what you would say to a founder who's an earlier stage than you even, or just starting out? What are some of the key things?
I would say the most important thing, really, and I mean that, is getting the right people. It's all about the people. If you have the right team, you can pull off anything. And I can't emphasize this enough. I've seen companies in my short career. I'm 30, right? I've worked in tons of companies, small and medium-sized enterprises, really large firms in very regulated industries like the aerospace industry and also the medical device industry. If you have the right team, you can do things that are unimaginable for everyday people until it's done, and then it changes their life. But you have to have the right people. You have to align everybody with the same vision, and you have to have the people with the expertise and the stamina to pull through hard times. It sounds like a postcard slogan or anything from Silicon Valley, but it is true. It is literally true. I've seen it and felt it on myself and with our team. It was always like that. You need people to stick around when it gets hard, and the wheat and the chaff will be separated in hard times automatically. The team was in the early stage of Healyan was quite dynamic. We had people considering to become part of our co-founders team, but then at the first instance when it got hard and it was really important to deliver on a deadline for a grant application, for example, they fainted and stepped out and didn't do it, right, and didn't help that much. And we're not that committed. You need committed people. You need the people with the right expertise. So it's like also like a statistical problem. You need a certain expertise, like for example, software architecture for medical devices. You need somebody who has regulatory experience with software for medical device development or anything regulatory contact-wise in software. This is already a very, very limited field, right? You have a lot of UI developers, backend developers maybe, but people with software experience in the medical device field is already limited. Then you need people in your network. Then you need people who are committed, and it makes it harder and harder to find the right people.
Layers and layers and layers,
layers and layers of like filters, I would say, of people that are just not suitable to be part of your team. It's not anything personal, but at a certain point they have to be personally invested in it. It's not like if you can accept an offer or an application of somebody who tries to become a part of your team. If any of those things don't align, it's actually a risk, because at such an early stage, like most founders are, you have a limited amount of time, as I said earlier. You have a limited amount of resources. Committing to somebody can be like a thing that drains all of your resources, financially and time. And you have to make sure that the people you're working with are absolutely the right people. I cannot stress it enough. And the right people open doors. We had people come into our team, especially in the neuroscience part of our team, that were opening doors for us. And this is the right thing. And person who listens to this of our team knows exactly who I'm talking about. Those are great people. You want to keep them. You want to incentivize them with equity. This is also very strong advice I would give everybody. If you have somebody who's dedicated, who has the expertise, who wants to pull through together with the entire team and bring the vision to reality, incentivize them, give them equity, make them part of our team, recognize them, praise them, shower them with help whenever they need it, because they will make it work together with you as a founders team. And those are the real co-founders. Those are the real co-founders. And they come in stages. Sometimes they come very early on when you cannot even formulate your vision clearly. As a founder, maybe the idea comes from one or two people, our founders team, right? And then people help you refine everything and be open to spinning your ideas back and forth, go into sparring sessions with your team and brainstorm how to make your approach better, how to make your messaging better, how to make your product better, how to even make your approach better, how to ask the right questions. And all the processes you develop over time to build a product and go-to-market strategy. Question that repeatedly with the right people. And if you have the right people you can rely on, everything's possible. There's no doubt about it, really. I've seen it in many companies. Even in large corporations with hundreds of thousands of employees, if you have a small dedicated team, they can bring change.
Yeah, tell you what, that's a really good bit of advice that you kind of went into the equity part there and incentivizing, because I think a lot of founders and leaders might say, you know what, people aren't pulling their weight. I can't find the right people. But there's also something on you to also create that, right? Because as a startup, let's be honest, it's hard. It's hard work. Sorry, hard work. You've got to pivot a lot. You've got to react to different things, and that's a tough journey to go on for everyone involved in that business. And if you aren't incentivizing those people, they might not be willing to go on that journey, right? So it's kind of on you to also, I guess, incentivize people to do it, right?
Yeah. And then what we were struggling with was actually giving those incentivizing equity compensations legally with a German company, because in Germany we have something called dry income problematic. If you give out equity, just like you would do in the US or UK, where you have a co-founder and they're willing to work for the company because they're really dedicated, they believe that the vision is worth pursuing, they have the expertise they need to help you build it and to help the team and be part of the team. They have a good character that fits your ethics and your company style and your culture, I would say. And then you just give them equity in the United States, like as part of a corp, a C corp, for example. You can just give them shares, right? And relatively similar in the UK and in Germany, the German IRS, so to speak, the tax authorities, they will tax them if you don't do this the right way. There are ways to avoid it legally, and to have this legal structure of your company set up in a way that you can actually incentivize people in Germany to get equity and build a company together with the team. It is kind of cumbersome at the beginning, right? But it's a matter of when they are taxed. In the United States, when, for example, the company goes public and has an IPO, then when the shares are converted into liquid cash, right, when they're paid out, then it's taxed. Then it's taxable income. And in Germany, just when you have an assumable worth of the company, an assumable price of the total company, like for sake of simplicity, let's make it 1 million. And if somebody receives 10% as a co-founder compensation package, so to speak, then they would have taxable income of 100,000, even if they don't have received any liquid cash. That's why it's called dry income. If you just put them into the trade register as a co-founder with 10% equity, the German IRS says, hey, you just received 100 grand, even though you don't receive liquid money. So please pay us 40% income tax on that? 40-50%. So they would immediately be taxable of 50 grand income tax. And there are ways to circumvent it legally, but you have to make sure to also have good lawyers and to have lawyers and tax attorneys who can set this up for you and your founders team in a way that nobody's hurt financially on a private level.
Yeah.
Right. And that it's taxable income when the shares are later liquidated and made into cash at an IPO stage. And then it's taxable income and not just from the beginning. Also, I have to mention, if you and your team have a history of founding companies and have some cash to spare, that would even be the better option, because then you have the company which is in a very early stage and you're really sure you can pull this off, and you have already taxed the income of the I would say the what is it called, like a virtual income of receiving the shares, and then you have then you've paid your taxes for receiving those shares, and later when you sell those shares, it might not be taxable again. And then when the company's worth appreciates, you have paid 50 grand of tax. Maybe the company goes in valuation from 1 million to 10 million in a few years, and then you exit your 10% as a co-founder and receive 1 million and don't pay taxes. So those are considerations you have to also spin through with your founders team, with the lawyers that are giving you legal advice, right? That are giving you legal counsel. And all those considerations have to be done and set up and made in parallel to all the product development things and all the other things like pitching for grants and applying for subsidies or pitching to investors. Also those institutions and also investors expect you to make the right legal decisions. So you also have to have a gut feeling of which lawyer can I trust who doesn't rip me off. And also build a network of trustable lawyers and law firms. And what we did was mostly go with recommendations from other successful startups. Obviously, with building a network and going to events for startups, you will encounter other startup founders who have successfully done a side project like this, for example, with share incentives, that you also want to, because you're at an earlier stage and you also want to do this. Just ask them, ask your network how to do things that you think are worth pursuing, because there are most of the time people who have done it. Even if it's just a side project of how to incentivize. It's a very important side project, but it's a side project, right? How to incentivize your co-founders and later team members, how to onboard them with equity, and that's a thing. As I said, you cannot leave this out. It's very important, but build a network of people who have done it, and then you will be more likely to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it gives you that kind of path to ultimately follow then, right? If people have done it. So
They can make intros, warm intros. It's always the best. Always a warm intro.
100%. Look, I really appreciate all the time you've given. It's been really, really useful, I think, where you've shared your nuggets of advice that I guess you've had to learn as you've gone along. And hopefully if someone actually is on that journey or about to start that journey, the things that you've shared, I'm sure will help other people. So thanks so much for it. It's been really enjoyable speaking to you. And maybe touch base again soon, Philip.
Thank you, Junaid. Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Stay healthy. Bye.
Bye.